Welcome back to my very little channel. I just wanted to start off the video by saying thank you to everyone who watched my first video and who commented and who subscribed to my video or subscribed to my channel. It meant a lot. Still means a lot, especially since this was my first time posting a video and my first time doing anything like this. Anyone who knows me in real life knows that I'm pretty shy, and it took a long time to be able to get to the point of making a video, let alone posting it. So it means a lot that people are watching. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about my experience and what I learned at the Theodore Payne Foundation propagation class that I went to on Friday, so 2 days ago. For anyone who doesn't know, the Theodore Payne Foundation is a nonprofit organization in Southern California, specifically Sun Valley, so it's kind of in the North Hollywood region of LA. They are a nonprofit organization that grows and sells California native plants. They also have classes like the one I went to and educate people on the importance of California natives, and so it's just a really good organization. It's good to support them. They have in their nursery obviously plants, but then they have like a little bookstore. They were selling their seeds that they from the plants that they grow, so the things that you wouldn't find at a regular nursery because it's curated for the California gardener, California native gardener I should say, because there are some plants here that you can get away with growing in California, but they're not necessarily native. Basically, are just a nonprofit organization trying to get people into California native gardening, which benefits you as a gardener because you're not using as much water and resources, and also benefits the wildlife. So I have my notes from the class. They provided a worksheet, but I also had brought a notebook just because the worksheet is basically on instructions on how, or like a syllabus of how the class is going to go, and then instructions on what the activity we were doing. But the teacher of the class, Tim Becker, who is their director of horticulture, he is obviously very knowledgeable, and he was just spitting out facts, and I was just trying to rapidly write everything. And it was so funny because a lot of the things that a lot of the words he was using, I would write them out how I heard it, and then I would Google, and about 95% of the words that he said I did not spell correctly, so then I had to rewrite them. So that was kind of funny. But anyhow, I'll get into what propagation is if you don't know. So the definition of propagation is the process of creating new plants. I did this a lot with my indoor plants. I don't have as much experience at propagating outdoor plants. I have tried, and about 95% of the plants that I have tried to propagate nothing's happened. They get root rotted, or they get soggy, and then no roots grow, or I can't get the plant to survive long enough to put it out in my garden. So that's why I really wanted to take this class, because I wanted to learn what I was doing wrong. And I mean, my dream is to own my own nursery, so if I can learn how to propagate plants successfully, then I could also help my business, and maybe one day I could do a class like this once I get enough knowledge on it. I'm really passionate about propagating because I think it's so cool to take a plant and then get 20 plants out of it, and it is very gratifying to see a cutting turn into a new plant. Like, I just love that. Like, I love checking in every day and seeing, oh, there's like a new root there, or oh, there's a new leaf there. It's just so satisfying. So that's why I wanted to take this class, to get better at it, because I wasn't that great, or still not that great, but I feel like I could be a lot better now that I've learned a lot from Tim Becker. There's what he went over. There's so many different types of propagating, which I knew some of them, but some of them actually caught me by surprise. well, I guess I'll go into the two branches of propagating first. So there's sexual, which is seed propagation, which I actually didn't realize that that was a form of propagation. I just thought that that was, I don't know what I thought, but I didn't think that was a form of propagation, but it is. It's sexual propagation. Asexual propagation is stem cuttings, which is when you, the most classic example is cutting a basil stem, putting it in water, getting a new basil plant. There's root cuttings, which I did not know was a thing, but he specifically mentioned yarrow as a way to propagate via root cutting. This is my yarrow plant. It's looking, I have to kind of cut all this back, but a lot of this is new growth from when I bought it during the summer. Well, I bought it during the summer, and now it's starting to have a lot of new growth. But if I took this out of the bucket and I just literally, he took one, took a plant out, and he split it down the middle, and that became two plants. Like, so you could do that with the yarrow. I'm actually really surprised that you could do that, and pleasantly surprised because I'm gonna do that with this one. It's pretty big. I'll probably split it up 3 ways, and then also look into more plants that you could do it this way. Ants. There's ants on the yarrow. Leaf cuttings. I think when at first I was like, what can be propagated by a leaf? And then I realized I was like, oh, succulents. That's how we propagate succulents. Division is also a method of propagation. That's when you're talking about a rhizomatic plant. Rhizomatous. I think it's rhizomatous plants such as irises and grasses. I didn't realize that grasses were rhizomatous, but they are, which is cool to know. But I didn't know what a rhizome was before that class. Actually, I knew what it looked like and I knew kind of what it did, but I didn't know what it was. But Tim Becker, the teacher of the class, he explained what a rhizome was, and it made so much sense the way he explained it. But he explained it as just an underground stem. So you know how you have your stem and you have branches coming off of it, or just leaves coming out of it, depending on what plant you have. Just imagine that underground. So you're gonna have new growth, new plants that can come up from that rhizome. New plants once you cut off that segment of the new bud. So if you just kept your irises all on the one rhizome, it's still one iris plant. But if you were to cut each segment where there was leaves, then that would become a new plant. So you could do that with grasses too. There's another word that I learned. It's called stolon, and it is the stem of the runners of strawberry plants. So you know how at the end of the season you usually get those runners. Well, the stem part of it is a stolon, and then the new plant props up from that stolon. Another way is grafting, which is how we do our fruit trees. Tissue culture is another way of propagating asexually. The only example I know of this is in a lot of indoor plants, specifically a plant called Rhaphidophora tetrasperma. It is also nicknamed the mini monstera. You see it in a lot of nurseries. It's like usually climbing up some sort of trellis. It used to be very expensive because it took so long to grow, but then they started tissue culturing it, and that's when you just take like a fragment of the stem and put it in some sort of sterile condition, and it will grow a new plant. And that has made it so that it is in nurseries a lot more than it was like 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I couldn't get that plant. I wanted it so badly. Now it's like in Home Depots, and it's because of the tissue culturing. To mention that asexual propagation is basically cloning the plant, so you're not going to get any sort of genetic diversity, which leads me into the advantages and disadvantages of cutting propagation. The advantage is that it's really fast, faster than growing a seed and having it germinate and having it go through that life cycle. It's also consistent because it is a clone of the plant, so you know what you're gonna get. You know that what the flower is going to look like, you know what the leaves are going to look like, you know if it's acclimated to your region. So a lot more consistency, there's a lot more consistency in growing that plant. The disadvantage is that it is cloning your plant, so you're not going to get genetic diversity. If there was something wrong with your plant and you took a cutting from it, then that same problem is going to be in your plant. Whereas, you know, if you think of like the Punnett square, when you have two parents and the chances of their offspring having a disease or having whatever thing you are checking for, the seeds create that genetic diversity, so they create that percentage of it having the disease or it not having the disease. When you're propagating from cuttings, you're gonna get that disease no matter what, because you're cutting it from that plant. So you can't store cuttings the way that you store seeds. So you collect your seeds, you put them in a little jar, and then you can keep them in your house at like a stable temperature for years. I mean, they have this like a seed library, I think in England, some European country, and they have seeds that are 1,000 years old, and then they try to grow them and they're able to grow them. Seeds are meant to be stored for a long time. That's how they've been able to be around a lot longer than us. When you're cutting a plant, you have to plant it as soon as possible that day, within the hours, or else you're just not going to have success with trying to propagate that plant. They went over the supplies that we were using. They provided them all, so you're going to need some sort of pruners or like floral snips to actually cut the plant to propagate. You're going to need some sort of disinfectant. They used a gardening disinfectant, which was like ammonium chloride, I believe, but I've seen at the farm where I work out, we use a solution of vinegar. You can use bleach, you can use I've seen like rubbing alcohol used, basically anything that can kill off germs, so that you're not transferring disease or pathogens. Basically, if you're cutting anything, you can pass it with those pruners, so you want to make sure that they're clean. You're also going to need a container, and before you put anything in that container, you're going to want to disinfect it with that solution that you use to disinfect your pruners. They use a flat, which is, they use this. However, their holes were not as big. They were the little circular ones, but it was a flat like this and it was a little bigger. So I'm just using this as an example, but they sell them a lot at garden centers, and sometimes they give them away for free because that's how they receive the plants. So I think they can either send them back to whoever they're receiving the plants, or they keep them for their own use of them. You're going to have a media, which is going to be two components. It's going to be a retentive component, which is what's going to hold the water, and then it's going to be a porous, some sort of porous component, which is going to allow for drainage. They use vermiculite and perlite. They did a 1:1 ratio. They also mentioned you can use some sort of core, like I guess coconut core, for the retentive, and peat moss also for the retentive. But for the porous, the only two options were perlite or pumice. But the reason why they don't use it is because it's very expensive. So perlite is not as expensive, and it is easily accessible. Like you see perlite everywhere, Home Depot, Ace, and then your regular local nursery. Vermiculite is also pretty accessible. I've seen peat moss too. So it's kind of whatever you want to use, but I would suggest using what they use because they're very successful at propagating. So I'm just going to copy everything that they're doing. The other supplies were labels, so you know what you are cutting and when you cut it, a pencil to label, and then rooting hormone. I've used rooting hormone, and I can't tell if I've had success with it, but I think it should be used when you're doing these kind of cuttings. So the one that they used was like $400 a gallon, but they are diluting it a lot. But I wouldn't suggest getting that just because you don't need it. You're not a nursery that's needing to produce 10,000 plants, and that's just one plant, 10,000 of one type of plant. You could just go to like your nursery and get like the little powder rooting hormone that's like $6 or $10, and that's lasts me probably years. I'm not needing to sell a bunch of plants, so I mean, it would be nice if I could get a lot of plants out of what I'm propagating, but at the end of the day, it's not like I'm needing to make money or needing to fulfill a demand. He was telling us about the demand that he has for some of the plants, and that he will put out 10,000 of one plant out in the nursery, and it will be gone like in a few days, and then he has people complaining to him that there's not enough of the plants. So then he said that he is not even going to think about putting out plants unless he's got more than 10,000 to be able to put out, because the demand is just so much there. So there's a before you start, which is we disinfected everything. We prepared our medium, and then in their case they have to prepare their rooting hormone, but in your case you won't, because you'll just buy the powder, which is just this like little container of powder, and you're just gonna dip your nodes into it, and then tap off a little extra, and then put it in your media. So before I get into the process of taking a cutting and also processing that cutting, I'm going to go in the conditions. Cool weather is the best time to take your cutting. So just like harvesting in the morning, you want to do it because there's more water in the fruit and the leaves of the plant, so you're going to get a juicier fruit or veggie. Same as when you're taking cuttings from your plant, you're going to want to do it when there's maximum water in the leaves and the stems of the plant. Usually either like you want to do it like earliest in the morning that you can. Days that are overcast are supposedly good, and when there's like some sort of dew in the air. So this is where this part of the class is where I was like, oh, that's why I'm not successful. That's why I can't grow anything or propagate anything from outside. So to choose your plants, or to choose your cuttings, I should say, is you're going to want to get soft woody part. That's keyword, soft woody part. So the part that has grown in the last year, but it's not new growth in like the last 1 month. That might be kind of confusing, but this is my apricot mallow. So you could see that right here, let me turn it. Right here is pretty flexible. It's soft, and I'm like completely bent it. I don't know if you can see that. I've completely bent it. So you're not gonna want to take a cutting from that. This part, it's a little more stronger. You can see a little more thicker. I can bend it slightly, you know, like I can bend it, but not as much as this one up here where I can bend it fully. So I could just bend it. This part doesn't have a woody stem on it. Oh, I guess this would be a woody stem. This, you don't want to take a cutting from this. Nothing will happen from this. This is where you're going to want to take a cutting, where it is slightly woody, but it is still flexible. That's why I made the mistake, because I thought in my head that I need to take a cutting from like the oldest part, but roots aren't going to come out of a woody stem. So that was like my first epiphany, if you will, that I was not quite on the right track. I was not going to have successful propagation just from the beginning. Like nothing what I would have done later on would have fixed that. Once you cut what you want to propagate, you're going to process it. And to process it, you need to cut your stem into 4 to 6 inches inch pieces. So the way he did it was like you use your palm as like a way to measure. So if I had, let's just say like a stem that was like this big, I would cut, that would be one plant. If I had one that was double this size, that would be 2 plants. So here's gonna kind of use that as a measuring tool, because some people were like cutting really big strips and like trying to put that into their medium, but he was like, no, that's way too long, like your plant, your propagation is gonna die. So you have to make sure that it's able to retain that water in the stem, but it's not gonna have to have so much energy to get the water all the way up to the leaves. So once you have your pieces broken up, then you're going to, let's see if I can get an example. So I just got an example plant. You can see that this is not woody on the bottom. It is a little flexible, but not so much. This part is super flexible. So this part would not be a good cutting. So I'm just gonna find that part where it starts to get a little flexible and then cut. Other than that, everything is good. So on here you can see there's flowers. So you're gonna wanna cut off all those flowers, because that is gonna expend energy to keeping the flowers alive, where it could have been providing energy for root development. That's what you're trying to do. You want roots to grow, you don't want more flowers to grow. So this has a lot of leaves on it. Now typically has thorns on it, so typically I would have just I would have removed 2/3 of the leaves. So probably around here, I put my finger there, and then I would run my finger along the stem and pulling off the leaves, but I can't really do that because there are thorns here. But that means I have to be careful, because I want the stem to be as flat as it can be. When I was removing the leaves in the class, I was worried I was gonna like rip off too much of the stem, and I was worried that when I was I was holding it with my left hand, I was using my right hand, it was like too strong, and there were some cases where I was ripping off some of the layer of the stem. So I decided to hold with my right and then remove with my left, because my left hand is weaker and I didn't ruin anything. So if you're concerned about that, I would try that. But you see how there's like some hanging out, like it's not fully flat, it needs to be fully flat. So I'm just gonna go in and with my pruners that I didn't disinfect, but I don't think I'm gonna plant this, I'm just using this as an example. That is as flat as I can get it of this, because there was thorns and leaves. So we have 1/3 of the leaves remaining. These leaves are pretty small, so I'm not gonna cut them, but with the plants that had bigger leaves, like double this size, they wanted you to cut them in half, because you just need enough leaf for the plant to photosynthesize, but you don't want too much of it, because then it's losing a lot of water and energy, and that's where you want all that water and energy to go into root development. So just to show you guys what they mean by cutting the leaf in half, I'm going to cut this one in half, but you wouldn't need to if you are propagating this plant or a plant with leaves as little as this. So they just, like that, you just cut it in half. Yeah, and they did that with all of the leaves on the top. So usually with like the sages, when they have like a big bundle of them, you would pull it all up and then just cut in half. And then here you can see that there's like a lot of, it's pretty long, so I probably should have broke it up into 2 plants before I even started removing leaves, because look at it. I could have probably got 3 plants out of this, but for the sake of the video, I'm just gonna work with this one. Pretty big. He said that you only need 1 node on the plant to propagate it. In my head, I'm not that great at it, so I'm gonna want to double my chances of having root growth. So for me personally, I will probably keep 2 nodes on it. 2 nodes on the cutting if it's like a cutting that isn't too hard to grow, and then I'm thinking maybe on a plant that I know I've had a lot of difficulty, I'll do 3 nodes, but that is kind of risky because you don't want your stem too long, because then it's going to take too much energy to bring that water up to your leaves. So you kind of have to find something in the middle of your own, I guess, ability. So here I left 2 nodes on, but the nodes are pretty close together. So I feel confident, like it's about the size of my palm, so it's not too big. Then you would dip your nodes into the breathing hormone. In their case, they were using that solution, and you were swirling it around in the solution for 10 seconds and then planting it. So I also have an example as my cutting. As you can see, it's the flat mixture of vermiculite and perlite. The bottom has these little holes, so it's not enough for the media to come out, but it's enough for water to drain out. You can see my little cuttings and how I removed half of the leaves. And he also mentioned that you can stick these very closely together, and that you actually should, because you don't want to waste your resources and waste space. And in their case, they need to pack at least like 200 in each of these flats, because they don't have enough space for themselves. If they're making 2,000 or 10,000 plants, they're gonna need a lot of these flats if they're just putting in like a few at a time. So we're gonna pretend I just put my rooting hormone on this, and we are going to sorry, I have to lift it up again. This, put it straight in. All right. And he had mentioned that you shouldn't have any leaves under, so this has a leaf under, and you want to make sure that the leaves aren't like, see how that leaf is on there on the media? You don't want that either. But I think this cutting is just too tall, so I'd have to cut it again. But yeah, you notice how mine, none of the leaves are touching the media. Yeah. You don't want the media to dry out, but you don't want it to stay soggy. That is the reason why there are drainage holes on the bottom, so that water could flow out and doesn't get soggy and heavy. But you can also tell when it's dried out, because perlite and vermiculite, they are very light substances when they are dried. So when it's like you're lifting it up really easily, you know you gotta give it a water. But I found that feeling how heavy it is a good indicator. You're gonna want to keep it in indirect light, so I'm gonna keep it outside on this deck. That you don't want it in shade, because then you really have to watch your water, and also it's not going to photosynthesize as easily, so it's going to have to work harder to make energy. So you want to be able to give it everything it needs, so that it is not having to go into shock or anything to keep the plant alive. At the class, we got to do our own cutting of what we wanted. I did a lot of salvias and manzanitas. I actually have them written down what the names were because they're a little hard to say, so I had to look them up after the fact. So the first one was called Salvia apiana compacta, which is a white sage. Another one was Salvia mellifera, which is a black sage. There's Salvia thor, which is a white sage hybrid. There was a Carpentaria californica, which is a bush anemone. They had a white cloud manzanita and a little sir manzanita. I was really excited that we were getting manzanita cuttings because I have noticed, oh, it's raining now. I noticed a lot of the manzanitas at my farm, and I think they are so cute, and the flowers on them are these like little hanging, like, I guess like, to me they look kind of like pomegranates, like little mini pomegranates. They come into like different colors depending on which type of manzanita you have, and I wanted one, so I want to see how successful I could be at propagating, so then I can repropagate at my farm and get some more manzanitas planted. Yeah, I'm pretty happy. I left the class feeling like I learned a lot from it. I got to take some plants home. I got about like 20 of my own cuttings, but the person who was sitting next to me, he said that, he was like, oh, do you want my flat, because I'm going on the bus so I can't take it with me. And I was like, yeah. So I have about 40 cuttings now. Yeah, so you got your material, I got 40 cuttings. I was able to shop at the nursery. I learned from a specialist. I was able to be around people who are also into plants. However, I was the youngest person there, so that was a little interesting. It's kind of a common theme that I'm finding in the plant community, that everyone is about 40 and up who are going to classes or going to plant sales for outdoor plants, I should say. I like indoor plants too, but indoor plants, I don't know, I guess I'm going through a phase. I mean, they're just not as like satisfying, I guess. I don't know. I do like them, and that's originally how I got into plants, as indoor, but I'm finding that I am enjoying outdoor gardening a little bit more. However, outdoor gardening doesn't seem to be all that popular with younger people in my day-to-day life. Like, I see it on Instagram, but so wherever I go, I'm usually the youngest person, and I feel a little awkward at times, but not awkward enough to stop doing what I love. So yeah. I think that is it for the video. I try to concise everything and not sound too crazy when I was explaining everything, but if you have any questions, ask me, because I feel like there's a lot more I can go into. I'm going to link Theodore Payne Foundation, and I'm going to include Tim Becker's email, because he gave it to us and said like he loves responding to emails and DMs about native gardening. He's trying to get as many people into it. He's super passionate about it, which was also fun because you like learning from someone who's also passionate. I was also in like a classroom setting, which I hadn't been in so long. Kind of like made me miss it a little bit, and I'm like thinking maybe I should go back to school to get like a botany degree or something, or even just take one college class on a subject that I want to learn. But it was definitely fun being back in the classroom and like the whiteboard and him explaining what a rhizome was and all that. I would recommend the class if you are, because they don't only do that class, they do a seed starting class, and they do like other classes. So I would recommend going to class if you live in California and you can travel there, or if you're like already traveling to California. Definitely wouldn't recommend it if you're like out of state, because that's just like too much, you know. But for me, I was lucky enough to have someone drive me. I didn't have to do any driving, so that was really nice, and it was nice that he offered to do that. They also do online classes, so I would just suggest following them on Instagram and checking in on following them on Instagram, and they post when they're gonna do classes. They post all the events that they're gonna have, and I think it's worth it definitely to do an online class. They're like 2.5 hours long, and the online class was like $35. The in-class class that I went to was $80, and I think that it's obvious that the reason why the on-site class is more expensive. You're getting cuttings, you're getting to be out there on their land, whereas the online class, you're not getting the cuttings, you are getting all the information, and you're meeting new people through Zoom. But I think it's worth it. Again, it's a good Christmas gift idea. You could probably, I mean, a really good Christmas idea is like get some of their seeds, some of their maybe a t-shirt or a beanie from them, and then put that in like a gift basket or something, gardening gift basket, and then also include a class that they can take. Or they also do gift cards, I believe, so you could do that. I would say that I think it's shipped by Christmas, like it's shipped by Christmas, you have to order by a certain time. However, I think if you live in California, you might be able to get it quicker because shipping is a lot quicker if you're just shipping to LA to like San Francisco or San Jose or wherever. I think out of state, that's when it's like a little dicey. It's starting to rain and the sun is gone now, so I think I'm gonna go inside and have some more coffee because I think I need it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Again, if you guys have any questions, you can DM me on Instagram at planty Alice, and then you can comment on this video. Thank you for watching the video, and I am going to try my very best to post one next week. Let's see if I can do 3 weeks in a row of posting. Any suggestions in the comments of my next video? I have a few ideas, but if there is something more compelling, I will definitely try and do that instead. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, whatever day it is. I hope you have a great week, and I hope you had a great start to December. Have a great start to December. Bye!